Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? After the success of the first video, I thought there must be a demand of cheap attribute for festival decks, and I have still a few up my sleeve, so I thought why not do a second video. I love lots of the decks that I've built so far, and some of them were quite favorites of mine back in the days when I actually made them, but I haven't touched them since. And now this festival might be the time to revisit them, change them a little bit because some stuff has changed balance-wise as well. And we have to make certain adjustments, especially with Springans, a fire deck nonetheless. Interesting. I think this is the first one that I have done so far. Obviously, we had to cut the whole Albaz engine because Albaz is dark and the fusion monsters are dark, so the whole getting stuff to the graveyard with your Xyz monster isn't so prominent anymore. Other cards I had to cut was one Pot of Prosperity because, well, this card is limited now, so you can't be playing 2 or 3 anymore. Gives the deck a tiny dent to the consistency. You can still be playing stuff like Planet Pathfinder if you feel like you don't get into your field spell enough. But with Terraforming, Springans Watch, Springans Booty, and the Field Spell, and Pot of Prosperity, hopefully this should be enough to consistently get into the Field Spell most games. And for the ones that you don't, you still have a trap lineup where you can be doing some stuff. I sided out the Solemn Judgment and put in some Infinite Impermanence because these days most people will have this card because it's in the Master Pack bundle for free, I want to say. So that should be working. For the extra deck, I just run lots of rank 4 monsters and some of the old stuff and some link 2s, so we can use the third effect of Sprite Smashers as well, and some other link monsters that we can be playing in the festival that aren't expensive. Doesn't really matter too much because usually the main monsters you want to be going into are these Xyz monsters. They do most of the work. You'll have some issues from time to time, but they do most of the work. We also have Sprite Smashers now in terms of consistency in a way, because you can now get some of the Springans monster from your deck onto the board, which is quite good because that gives you access to Springans Captain Sargaz during your opponent's turn, and that then can use its effect to detach one Xyz material from one of your Xyz monsters, your Springan Xyz monsters, and then pop one card on the field, one face-up card, sadly, but it is what it is. Other than that, I haven't done too much remodeling of the deck, just certain things like the Albaz engine has been cut out. You will be seeing this all in the original deck profile. If you want a more detailed version of the deck profile, then have a look at this. I will put the links in the description. And this deck, I would say, it's mid-tier. It's not very, very good. It's not very, very bad. You can have a fun time with it. You can win some games with it, but you cannot expect to win every single game with it, or even like 80%. It's not the most competitive deck, because otherwise you would have seen it on the ladder a bit more often as well. But one thing, if you are thinking about investing in this deck, eventually in the future, this deck will receive quite some prominent support. I think one card that makes it super crazy in certain plays, things like a Soul Charge mixed in with some other shenanigans. So it's not too bad investing in this deck. Now, you can do quite a lot of things with the Albaz engine in here as well. There are quite a lot of things. I think there's another Springans card, technically, that's more part of the Albaz branded kind of stuff, but I think this one was also not allowed to be played in this one, so this is a bit more basic version. Therefore, ranked play, you can upgrade this deck a tiny bit as well, and it is fun and is a bit of a different play style, although you do rely on your field spell quite a lot. You can smash some rank 8 engines in here with the cards that goes off of the field spell. I think some worm monster that is level 8, and you can special summon when you control this field spell, and then you can do stuff with that one as well if you want to go into rank 8s and not just use them with the field spell, for example with this one. So very, very interesting cards to mention. You can obviously be playing Therions in here because it kind of works with this one as well in combination. And obviously Abyss Dweller, very, very good card because it's a rank 4 that you can actually use, although Cheerlements are not in this format, so yay. Let's move on to the next deck profile. Next up is quite literally Earth, Wind, and Fire. We have Fire, we have Earth, and we have a Wind monster that is basically one of our main playmakers, so I would say we have accomplished that mission. Talking about missions, I had to change quite a lot for Metalfoes. You can see the deck is dirt cheap, but also it has its massive weaknesses because we lose out on so many different things. From my original list, I had to cut the Supreme Dragon King Dark Worm stuff, the whole engine, level 7 engine, which is why I run triple Deskbot 003, obviously double Deskbot 005 then, and one Deskbot 007, because this is a level 7 monster that I can summon out of the deck, which can be used and doesn't lock you into certain stuff. So this one is very, very nice. Plus, technically, they cannot target Deskbot monsters you control for attacks. And yeah, that can be somewhat helpful. So this is something that I had to take out. I had to take the Pendulum Synchro monster out, the tuner monster that I had, because this one was also dark. So I decided to go for one of the newer cards, Symphonic Warrior Guitarist, I think. This one can be somewhat nice. If you have one card in your field spell zone, you can, the Symph Amplifier, you can special summon this card from your hand. But if this card is normal or special summon, you can target one card in your Pendulum Zone, return it to the hand. Very, very important. Can come up quite recently as well. The Pendulum effect isn't that good because you don't run other Symphonic Warrior cards, but this one can help you going into this one in combination with the Metalfoes, and then this one can special summon one of the level 7 scales that you have. So you can go into your Polarized Absolute Dragon. We also lack a Gravity Controller, so you need one other monster on board. So you can either go into Cross Sheep or into some other stuff depending on what you have. Duel Transfer is one of the cards that come to mind as well. What else did I change? I put in one Master of Oz. Just if this card gets destroyed by my opponent's card effect, then I can summon Master of Oz. Isn't that crazy? Not that much, but it's fine. I pumped up the Metalfoes combinations up to 3 because now we have more chances of popping them and more chances of going into our Metalfoes. I have put Painful Decision up to 2 so I can start more Metalfoes combos and get stuff in the graveyard, because that can be helpful for things like Mithrilium and so on. So it's not terrible either. I put in one Metalfoes counter just because I feel like the meta isn't as strong, so this card is a tiny bit better now because you can actually go into a grind game and you can actually do all the things that Metalfoes used to be super good at but aren't that good at anymore. So there's that, and I had to cut certain things. Guiding Ariadne didn't work, so I cut Solemn Judgment. I really only need to run 2 Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi anyway, so this worked out. I do play one Ash Blossom now because most people will have it, and it's just a nice card, especially in a format where decks are a bit more rogue than competitive, and Ash Blossom still has a massive effect on rogue decks. Obviously, you can be playing heavy Metalfoes Electromite. I just didn't include it because if you run Electromite, you kind of want to run a deck that can do Electromite combos, and I feel like in Metalfoes themselves, Electromite isn't, like, it's still good because of the pop effect and whatnot, but you don't necessarily need it. Obviously, if you have it, you should be playing it, but most decks would rather be playing around this card than just using it as a side card, so I feel like it's not necessary, but if you have it, it is very good. For the extra deck, not much has changed. One Duel Transfer, so we have a Gav Dragon, Power Code Talker just to make up for the cards that we cannot be playing. You could be running this at 2 and this at 2 if you want to, if you feel like you can go into the rank 7 plays more often than you can at the moment, then that is also fine. And other than that, I have changed nothing about this deck. This deck can OTK reasonably easy. It is a control variant with some combo elements, so it focuses a lot on monsters. It's a Pendulum deck, I know. Don't stone me just now, but Pendulum decks aren't as annoying as you might think they are. Give it a try. It's very cheap, it's very fun, and it can do some stuff, and you can upgrade this with lots of different decks. There are lots of competitive variants out there. Magician Souls is very, very interesting in this one because you can send all of the useless cards to the graveyard, and this just has to be sent from the field to the graveyard, so technically you can get rid of it different ways as well. The deck in general, very, very playable, not super competitive, but it is very fun, and I think it has kind of been forgotten about, especially since people don't really care about pendulums anymore, but also they don't care about Metalfoes anymore, which is quite sad because the deck is super, super interesting at least. Let's move on to the next one though. That one's going to be a doozy. Alright, for the second deck, I've brought you something that you've probably seen quite a few times if you're looking for cheap decks for Master Duel. It is Phantasm Spiral Control. What else would it be? Another water deck, another deck that does very, very controlled stuff, but you lack floodgates in this version because the Attribute Festival, for once, got rid of all the floodgates, and skill drain is particularly not part of this anymore, so you have to compromise and have to change certain stuff. The good thing is, in my original deck profile, which obviously is linked in the description, I have not used the stuff like skill drain either because I wanted to keep the deck as cheap as possible, so this is not going to be much different. I cut some cards. I decided to play Gaga Gigo now instead of the 7-colored fish, just in case you run into Mirror Matches and someone else plays 7-colored fish, so you have this 50 attack point difference. I decided to, for this variant, include Phantasm Spiral Dragon and the Spiral Wave just to have one more card to search off the field spell, and also it can be funny from time to time, and it gets the second effect of C Stealth Attack live. Also talking about C Stealth Attack, I have decided to cut this down to 2. I felt like I bricked on it quite a lot. You can decide to put it back up to 3 if you want to. It's nice for protection, but didn't feel like I needed that much protection, rather than if I actually played this in ranked. And half store things like Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi. You could also be playing Champion's Vigilance, but it doesn't go off as much. It's a better effect. Doesn't go off as much because you can't use it with your normal monsters that are level 4, or even with the Paleozoic monsters, because they're still treated as normal monsters, and this just wants you to have a face-up non-effect monster. Not sure if this counts as a non-effect monster, actually, the Paleozoic, but I think it should in the end. Not sure, but these ones for sure are, so we have that one. Also, for the draw engine, I had to cut down on Pot of Prosperity because it doesn't exist at 3 or 2 anymore. So I put in 1 Pot of Extravagance. I still run 1 Card of Demise because Card of Demise it's not so good going first or first turn. It's better in the grind game because you actually get stuff to your hand, but you can run things like Advanced Draw as well if you want to. You can run things like a second Pot of Extravagance in addition to it if you want to. I just feel like this can fill your hand back up in the grind game when you're out of stuff. It's a bit like a Pot of Avarice that doesn't shuffle things back into your deck and stops you from special summoning. So it does collide with Unexpected Die, and it does collide with the effect of the Phantasm Spirals to be able to use it from hand, but it can add some grind game if you play against another grindy deck. This is basically all I've changed. I've also added 1 Drowning Mirror Force in here and put the Lost Winds up to 3 and so on. I just changed like some of the ratios of the trap cards just in case. You don't have to run like triple Torrential Tribute either if you don't want to. There's lots of things that you can be doing. Play Max C in here, whatever. This is just a skeleton of the deck, and I just wanted to showcase that it's well playable. For the extra deck, we just run some rank 2 stuff, rank 4 stuff. We run some link stuff, but you see with the pots in the deck, it doesn't really matter if you run it. And this deck is dirt cheap in the end, so very, very nice to be picked up. And you can easily play it in a best of 1 in ranked, at least till like Platinum 5 or 4. Then you have to make certain additions that then you could basically play any other control deck and it would probably be a bit better than this one. Let's move on to the final deck profile. Last but not least, a deck that has been hampered a bit by this event's ban list, not for the fact of because it runs dark monsters, but because of the fact of we do not have access to Floowandereeze and M-Pen. Very tragic. So I had to change the list that I already had to change, sadly, because this field spell went down to 2. So we already had to change quite a lot with that one. Now I have to include different cards. I had to cut down Planet Pathfinder by 1. You can technically still run it at 3. There's a variant that I tried out, but it wasn't that cheap, that you can be playing, and also didn't really want to be crafting Pot of Duality right now. You could be running 2 Duality instead of Extravagance and Prosperity, then run 1 Domain of the True Monarch, run Planet Pathfinder at 2, and if you have Domain or this one, then you're kind of set to go. The problem is if you Pathfinder into Domain, then you usually cannot really Tribute Summon unless you also draw into the Floowandereeze Trap card, so this is a bit annoying. But with Domain, you can cut your complete extra deck and then have another Floodgate for your opponent. Plus, it works in combination with Ryza the Mega Monarch, which you can reduce the level, and then it also does stuff. It's not amazing of a combo, but it would work as well. Other than that, I did change out the Mist Valley Apex Avian for 1 Impen, and I had to cut the Earthbound Immortal, but I felt like we don't really need 4 Tribute Summon monsters in our hand. Usually this one is the play starter anyway that we're trying to get into, and sometimes this one can get us some stuff if we have one of the other ones and we can activate them. And what I put into the deck as well is I put 1 March of the Monarchs just for protection, and you have quite a lot of draw and quite a lot of stuff to actually go through your deck, so it's not too hard to draw into this, and it can be helpful, especially in this one. I added 1 more of this. You technically want to be playing 3 of this because it's very, very important, and it adds some consistency to the deck as well. Other than that, I haven't really changed anything from the other deck profile, just the pots are a bit different now, and extra deck wise, I do run a lot of nonsense that can come up in theory but won't come up in actual gameplay. So it's mainly here for the pots. This is, well, a control style deck. It's kind of a combo deck in theory because you have to know some of the combos. Usually the combo just starts with, oh, can I get the effect of this one out? Yes, then you have plays, no, oops, that's a bit annoying. So this one is a very, very strong card for this specific deck. Sadly, you don't have as consistent access to this one when it comes to budget variants, but you still have the ability to do some stuff in this deck, especially with these cards being around. You can do things, and it's a budget version and it's a festival version. So if you really want to be playing Floowandereeze, this at least works most of the time. It's not as competitive and as oppressive because we're lacking Floowandereeze Empen anyway. You could be running Floowandereeze and Snow. I didn't want to include it in this deck because it would make the deck unnecessarily expensive, and I think this effect is a bit better than this one, just the way it is. I didn't want to craft it at all. If you have it, you can play this instead. If you feel like you lack one tribute summonable monster, then you can add one of them as well if you want to, and cut out some of the other cards. You can always cut out March of the Monarchs if you want to, and if you have 3 of this, definitely play it. Other than that, this deck is fairly decent for the fact that it doesn't cost much, and you can easily upgrade it into a deck that does okay in the meta if you want to be running all 3 of them and want to be running lots of the draw pods and whatnot. Then it isn't terrible either. Even at the moment against Tier Limits, it's not abysmal as well, because you can be running lots of hand traps that actually hurt that deck and not this deck. Hope you enjoyed my video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, I hope you have a nice day.